Hello and welcome back to our programme The New Normal, where we bring you the human stories behind this week's headlines. Coming up, a look at the coronavirus picture from Korea to Italy, and our teams in the Middle East report from Egypt and Lebanon. For our first report, we're heading to South Korea, a country currently grappling with a spike in coronavirus cases. And people who have had the virus but have now recovered are being encouraged to donate plasma to help those currently sick. Now, that call is being answered particularly by evangelical Christians in the country. Why them in particular? Our team in Seoul explains.
These worshippers at an evangelical church were infected with coronavirus in February. Now they're donating blood plasma to help the government develop a vaccine. Critics of the cult say it's an attempt to improve the church's image after it was linked to a huge cluster of infections at the start of South Korea's battle with the virus.
신천지 교회가 이제 고의로 퍼뜨린 거는 아니고 저희 또한 누군가를 통해서 감염이 된 입장에서
More than 4,000 members of Shincheonji, a secretive and politically conservative sect, were infected after it held mass gatherings early this year.
제가 3월에 아버님께서 코로나19 확진 받으셔서 돌아가시게 되셨어요. 그래서 저도 확진을 받고 저희 남편도 확진을 받고 해서 가족이 아버님 장례도 제대로 치르지 못한 가운데 너무 몸도 힘들었지만 마음이 너무 힘든 가운데 있었습니다.
한국의 일부 교회들이 신천지 교회를 이단으로 얘기를 하고 있지만 비방을 하고 요원 비어를 가지고 얘기를 하니까 사실과 달라서.
In the city of Daegu, people reacted with anger against the church, once the epicenter of South Korea's COVID-19 outbreak.
교회 다니는 사람이 좀 자제를 하고 정부에서 하지 마라 하면 안 해야 되지. 그걸 저 단체로 모여가지고 집회를 하고 뭐 하느님을 찾고 그게 아니잖아요.
Last month, thousands of members of another ultra-conservative church joined an anti-government rally in Seoul. Days later, 300 had tested positive, including the church's leader, Jung Kwang-hun. We spoke to him as he left hospital early this month.
단지 교회와 한국 교회를 이끌고 있는 선지자 중에 한 사람입니다.
이번에 일어난 그 바이러스 사건은 정부가 종교와 이 정치를 탄압하는 방법으로 바이러스를 지금 사용하고 있다고 생각합니다. 안녕하세요.
Jun has been accused of obstructing anti-infection efforts by health authorities. The church now faces a lawsuit.
In the West African nation of Senegal, coronavirus cases seem to be stabilising. But residents of Dakar now have another big worry: flooding. In the past few days, the weather has been so bad that it has turned roads into rivers. Thousands of people have been made homeless, and our reporters in the capital have been talking to some of those worst affected.
gisuñu du maire du préfet du kenn ñun sonn nañu ci ceeb ak diwlin yi ñuy naxee ñun assainissement la ñu soxla lekk ak naan yàlla jox na ko ñëpp ku nekk pour mu dugg sa biir gémmiñ mais assainissement la ñu soxla yàlla Macky Sall su dee yaa ngi ñu dégg dimbale ñu ko defal ñu assainissement sonn nañu ñun tamit ci réew mi la ñu bokk su wote jotee dañuy bàyyi suñu itte yëpp dem wote ji.
For our next report, we're staying on the continent and heading to Egypt. Our reporters there have spent some time with the Ethiopian community in Cairo. The community says they're increasingly under attack by Egyptians because of a dispute between the governments of Cairo and Addis Ababa. This is over the construction of the Nile Dam. Egypt sees it as an existential threat, and it appears that some Egyptians are taking out their fears on Ethiopian refugees. Here's a closer look.
The Nile is at the heart of tensions between Cairo and Addis Ababa. Ethiopia has just completed the construction of a gigantic dam that Egypt fears will threaten its share of the river's waters. The diplomatic strain has inflamed nationalist passions in Egypt and led to a spike in attacks on Ethiopians living there. Tahir has lived in Cairo since 2013. He's a community leader for the estimated 16,000 Ethiopian refugees in the country. At the start of the summer, Abu was violently targeted.
شباب في الطريق وسألوه قالوا له أنت جنسيتك شنو؟ قال له أنا إثيوبي. بعدين الجماعة ضربوه عوروا هنا عروا على صدره عوروه وطعنوه بالسكين على رجله.
Abu claims that the police never followed up on his complaint. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs oversees the looking after of refugees and insists that it does what it can to guarantee the safety of Ethiopians.
Actually, this is new, and I encourage them to go to the police and to mention what happened, because whenever there is a kind of complaint, we took the maximum measures to address these complaints.
Yet many Ethiopian refugees say local animosity towards them is growing. Gamal fled persecution in his homeland 7 years ago. Today, feeling rejected in the country where he sought safety, he has lost hope.
لو فتح البحر ده إن شاء الله نموت في البحر نمشي ما البحر ما فتح قاعدين ننتظر ما فيش حل ولا نرجع بلد ما نقدرش حل البحر بسهولة.
A dangerous crossing that's become almost impossible. In recent years, Egypt has clamped down on migrants leaving illegally through the country.
Our next story today comes from Beirut. It's been over a month since the worst explosion in the city's history. Over 190 people lost their lives, and for the survivors, it's now a question of coming to terms with what they experienced. Our reporters in the city, Zahra bin Maloud and Thamin Al-Hatin, have spent some time with a plastic surgeon who's been helping those with grievous facial injuries.
Je suis sûre que je suis quelqu'un de miraculeux, parce que moi, je prie beaucoup.
Rita's family had to search for 14 hours before finding her at one of Beirut's hospitals. Her skull and face had been severely damaged by the explosion, and she was unconscious. This plastic surgeon has saved her life.
Je suis arrivée à l'hôpital de l'Hôtel-Dieu, et c'est là que tout a bien commencé. J'ai eu un rapide traitement pour mes yeux, ma tête, ma main, plein de choses aussi dans mon corps.
La partie du crâne qui a été enlevée ici, elle va être réparée. Et elle va être réparée selon une imprimante digitale en 3 dimensions qui fera la réparation et qu'on remettra en place sans aucun problème. Et les cheveux repousseront ad integrum.
Rita will undergo her next surgery in 10 days' time to reconstruct her face as it was before the explosion.
Nous avons beaucoup d'atteintes faciales. Beaucoup d'atteintes faciales parce que les gens étaient dans leur maison. Certains étaient près des portes, certains étaient près des fenêtres et ils ont été soit projetés, soit quelque chose est tombé sur eux. صباح الخير. كيفنا؟ ماشي الحال؟
ضغط الانفجار طيرني فتت بالحيط كان ثابت وجهي هون هو اللي فات بالحيط وصار ينزل دمه هيك.
100 people seriously injured are still being treated at this hospital in Beirut. Some of them will need at least 2 years for their faces to get back to their normal shape.
In Italy, they're hoping the worst of the pandemic is behind them after enduring one of the harshest coronavirus outbreaks. That was back in the spring. Now the city of Venice is looking towards recovery and reinvention. Our reporter Natalia Mendoza has spent some time in the floating city, 6 months on.
Seen from above, you could be forgiven for thinking that the clocks have stopped in Venice. Down below, life is returning to the famous canals and piazzas, but the equally famous hordes of tourists have yet to reappear.
It's a little bit weird. Not many people, the happiness is not to see the life. A little bit sad because shops are closed.
Not only shops, many restaurants and hotels also remain shut. And for those that have reopened, the situation's far from ideal.
Purtroppo a noi manca tutto l'indotto inglese, americano, russo, che sono i clienti quelli che hanno più capacità di spesa e quindi che comunque e dopo chi è più forte, chi ha un po' di soldini messi da parte riesce a sopravvivere. Noi già pensiamo a novembre di chiudere.
Before coronavirus, Venice and its lagoon attracted 30 million visitors a year. Now the lost revenue's seriously affecting the city's coffers.
Le casse pubbliche di Venezia hanno perso 100 milioni di entrate in questi mesi, da qui a fine anno prevediamo questa perdita. È una perdita importante perché finanziava servizi importanti.
And for Venetians, they've been a bone of contention for years.
Venezia ha puntato solo sul turismo, non ha puntato sul veneziano. Allora o si fa un passo indietro e si torna a volere il veneziano. Bisognerà rivedere tante cose di Venezia, secondo me.
Over 50 years, Venice has lost 100,000 people, 2/3 of its permanent population. For its green movement, that's not the only sign of dangerous decline.
Le lagune sono sistemi transitori, se non c'è l'opera dell'uomo per preservarle spariscono, sono un fenomeno transitorio. E dovremmo avere, credo noi tutti, la capacità di capire che se non facciamo nulla non consegniamo niente ai nostri figli e alle prossime generazioni.
Change or disappear, the stark choice facing one of the wonders of the world.
That's it for this week's episode of The New Normal. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll leave you now with some more images of Venice, where our reporters have been, despite the pandemic, to the 77th edition of the International Film Festival. Take a look at those images, and we'll see you next time.
This year, the Deauville American Film Festival is celebrating French movie stars like Vanessa Paradis, who's the jury president for 2020.
On parle de cinéma, on parle de la vie, on rigole et ça fait plaisir. Après les mois qu'on vient de vivre, c'est vraiment une chance que ce festival existe.
But because of the current exceptional circumstances, there will be no American filmmakers or actors this year. Despite this will be the most intimate occasion in the long history of the festival. The red carpet has been rolled out, masks are in place, audiences are in their seats. The festival is well and truly underway. Watch the 46th Deauville American Film Festival on France 24 and France24.com.